Good morning and welcome to another of the sub-chapters of the forthcoming novel, Letting Go. It's sub-chapter 7 of chapter 2. It's called Feeny in Panic. Since her diagnosis, Renee has accepted professional event invitations only with reluctancy. The first few weeks, he turned down most invitations to presentations, workshops, or conferences altogether. He attended the weekly team meetings as far as possible, including the occasional investment meetings in the City of London. Gradually, he gained some confidence in the therapy, which seemed to postpone the length of Feeny's struggle and suffering, and he became braver to venture into medium-term planning. Feeny felt the same way. But even this illusory confidence proved to be deceptive. His confidence had barely grown when he received a call from the therapy clinic. It was, as Rachel van Hagel van Ense put it in her diary, "One thought is about to split my head in two, namely that the future does not come to meet us, does not lie ahead of us, but streams over our heads from behind." Feeny had only set off for a checkup of the ongoing therapy after breakfast, without any warning, without any particular pain or signs. She had taken the car and gone to the clinic's oncology outpatient department. Then the cell phone rang. Feeny emotionally and anxiously asked him to bring her nightwear, toothbrush, and bathing utensils as quickly as possible. Yes, and to cancel the client appointments for that day. The phone numbers were in her calendar on her desk. How? Where? Without a car? What about the planned vacation? What to do with the children now? Who would let them know when they got home from school? What should they do on their own? Should Renee tell them about Mum on the phone from the clinic? Thoughts raced through his head as he packed her things, hoping not to forget anything. Booked train tickets via the app, made some quick calls, put off male and female disappointments, then set off for the clinic. He grabbed her small wheeled suitcase, hurried to the station and waited. On the way, he tried to call some friends, but to no avail. No one picked up. They were probably all at work. So leave the children on their own? He didn't want to talk to Feeny about it now. He couldn't. The client appointments had been postponed. Bruno had asked for an appointment too. Rene wasn't sure whether it was for himself or for Annika. He didn't have the nerve to deal with Feeny's appointments right now either. So he suggested calling him again towards the end of the week. Rene thought, don't add more worries to her worries. Call the school, explain that Alina couldn't be picked up by the bus, so she could have to go to her family's house with one of her friends. Jan still had music lessons in the late afternoon, so he wouldn't be home until the evening anyway. Why Feeny's panic? What now? Renee hurried from the station to the clinic. They didn't know Feeny's name at the gate. No, she wasn't on the ward. Maybe in the outpatient part. At the wrong desk. The outpatient clinic was independent, not connected to the hospital's database. So he was told to go around the buildings to the right, over the main road, along there to the next corner building where the entrance to the outpatient clinic was. He ran back as far as he could with his wheeled suitcase, looking for signs around the corner, then for the entrance. Indeed, Women's Oncology Outpatient Clinic, it was advertised. Thank goodness. Feeny, her name was on the secretary's calendar, but she was not currently in the outpatient clinic, but in the central hospital wing for a sonographic examination. So where was she? Then he was asked, "Who are you?" "Yes, her husband." "Then you should go back across the main road, up the stairs with the trolley case in his hand." So he went. He was looking for the sonography department. But where? No idea. Sonography? Straight ahead, then down the stairs again to the basement. And so he went. "Feeny in the basement?" "Yes, your wife is here." He would have to be patient and wait in the anteroom. His wife was just having an ultrasound scan, and it would be a while before the doctor could discuss the results with them afterwards. If he liked, he could also go to the cafe. They would call him. The nurse made a note of his mobile number on a small post-it note, which she stuck on a telephone system. Anyone who has only searched for these words in a dictionary of synonyms can hardly guess what patience, duration, and evaluation means. Waiting in the cafe, the clinic's canteen, first he was browsing through the daily newspaper, then eating a soup, followed by a black coffee. Another hour of waiting. Doctors and nurses came and go. Some walked along the counter, grabbing snacks, a salad, a dessert, eating, discussing the latest cricket tournament, the next season of the series they had watched the night before. Patients came through the door with and without infusion stands from which chemo bags hang. Time stubbornly resists trying to drive them away. René opened the laptop, but he couldn't get a thought together, had no nerve neither to read nor to write. So he browsed on the internet for new therapeutic approaches, studies that discussed various new ways of dealing with ovarian cancer. Why ultrasound? And why do they want to admit Feeny as an inpatient? Another coffee? He didn't want to. Instead, he opted for a green tea and remembered that Lena would be coming home from school in the early afternoon and that she would be the first of the two to arrive home without anyone there. Don't forget to call her. "Alina, yes, Mom has to stay here in hospital. I don't know why yet, but I'll call you as soon as we know something." "Does Jan know?" "Oh, he has piano lessons this afternoon. I'll try to reach him later." "I see." He realized that he had no ear for Alina at that moment because he was mentally seeing Feeny in front of him. He hung up without saying goodbye, waiting. At some point, he saw Feeny enter the room. She looked a little distraught. "Please come with me. I'm supposed to go to the other building for another examination. The ultrasound seems unclear. The doctor still wants to talk to us, but my blood values were bad, very bad. And I have to have blood transfusions today and tomorrow because I've lost a lot of blood, but they don't know why and where I'm losing it." René heard he had forgotten about Alina and Jan. He walked after Feeny and they went to the basement of the clinic, waiting in the anteroom. Waiting rooms. The name comes from waiting, usually a very long wait. In clinics, waiting times seem to increase regularly. Sorry. Sorry about that. In clinics, waiting times seem to increase regularly. There's no timetable here, neither information nor explanation. You don't wait for a future, but are exposed to open-ended information. Feeny and René had waited for hours, and not just once. And after hours of waiting, they had already seen the caring doctor rushing towards them, who then picked up the beeper just outside the consulting room, turned on his heel, and hurried back towards the operating theater without a word. And then another wait. Minutes, hours, no timetable and no information, no reason either. Waiting rooms are part of stretching life, and they seem to postpone death. Perhaps they're intended as a test case to test the ever thinning ribbon of life. Minutes, hours gnaw at the rope on which life hangs. Shortly before impact, the door to the doctor's office opened. This time the wait extended into the late afternoon. Feeny was not in any pain, even though she felt anxious about the uncertainty of the blood loss. Her neighbor in the waiting chair had to vomit several times. Finally, the doctor arrived and asked them to come to his office. There, visibly relieved, he told them that the sonogram had not revealed a hole in the intestinal stomach. Of course, there could be a leak, perhaps an ulcer, perhaps a tumor, which could explain the blood loss. Because this was so severe that Feeny had to be given several bags of foreign blood, so he decided to admit her as an inpatient. They were told to wait until they had signed the admission forms and the information sheet for the blood transfusion, and that these have been explained to them. Then she could go to the ward. There, they wanted to monitor any further blood loss. Perhaps the situation would stabilize, and then it was just an unexplained episode that would not necessarily recur. Somehow comforting, Rennie thought, and depressing at the same time. Feeny's phone went. Bruno, you know, Feeny said to Renee as she looked at the display, please pick it up. After Renee had already spoken to Bruno on the phone that morning about the rescheduled appointment, and he had put him off for later in the week, he was irritated. Hi, Bruno. It's Renee. Oh, Renee, excuse me if I call you again. It's about Feeny. I called a colleague of mine at the Charité University Hospital in Berlin, the leading European Center for Ovarian Cancer in Germany, and described Feeny's case. They said you could call them and get a second opinion. Professor Shukri is the director of the clinic. You can refer to him. Oh, thank you very much, said Renee. I'll do that as soon as I can, but I'm currently in the clinic here in Manchester because there are some complications for Feeny that haven't been fully clarified yet. But thanks. I'll call Professor Shukri and speak to you later. Yes, please, and tell Feeny that Annika and I are thinking of her. Oh, thank you. I'll tell her. Renee replied, and after Feeny was listening in, she nodded and they ended the conversation. Waiting. It was waiting again. And finally, a younger doctor came in, went through the forms with Feeny. Feeny signed them, and Renee took her to the ward. The room where she was to spend the night had already been prepared. In the meantime, Alina got in touch. She had informed the school, and they had made an effort to give Alina to an older school friend, whose mother picked her up with her daughter at the bus stop and accompanied Alina home. Alina called from the road to ask what was wrong, and Renee tried to reassure her. When she asked if she would find anything to eat in the fridge or if she could ask her friend's mother for some money and buy some groceries, he replied that fortunately there was still an extra portion of curry that he had cooked the night before and that they would both have to eat it. If it was going to take longer, he would have to inform Raj so that he could pick Jan from his class. He would try to get home as soon as possible, even if it might be a little late. Turning to Feeny after he had hung up, he said that she didn't need to worry. The children were okay. Feeny had no question. She lay her head back, exhausted, and grabbed his hand. Renee waited beside her bed, looking at her and only now discovering her pale skin, her face drained of blood, her cheeks sunken. Whereas in the morning he had seen her leave the house still supposedly healthy, at least healthy in a way. He paid no attention to the time, trying to hold on to her with his gaze while Feeny's hand slowly fell limp in his, and she seemed to drift off to sleep. It was only then, when the nurse with the food trolley opened the door to the room and switched on the light, that Feeny lifted her eyelids but seemed unsure of where she was. "You can eat normally," the nurse said to Feeny, and addressing Renee, "Can I bring you a cup of tea too?" Renee was grateful, and Feeny sat up a little in her bed, even if she didn't give the impression that she wanted to reach for the food. "Why don't you take the slice of bread and the piece of cheese?" she said to Renee. "And you," Renee replied, "you're not hungry?" She shook her head. "One sip of tea isn't for me." Renee spread the slice of bread with the enclosed butter and hoped that Feeny would develop a little hunger after him. He cut the slice in half, covered both halves with slices of cheese, and offered Feeny one of the two halves. Feeny actually grabbed the slice, more for Renee's sake than out of hunger, and took a demonstrative bite. Renee ate his, and they were both silent for a while. She seemed exhausted from the loss of blood, and also from the effort of the examinations and the waiting all day long. And so she began to doze again immediately after the first bite. Renee finished his slice and took the small tomato and the piece of cucumber. His wife's face was still pale. A short time later, there was a knock at her room, and the nurse politely pointed out that visiting hours were over. Feeny blinked. Renee gave her a kiss and said goodbye to her. Then he paused. "Do you know where you parked the car in the morning? And where do you have the car keys?" Feeny pointed at her finger at the front compartment of her computer bag. "Oh, yes," she says. "It's in the square in front of the clinic. Sorry, I forgot all about it. And hopefully I don't have a ticket, because I only drew one for 2 hours." Renee waved her off, hugged her again, and wished her a good night. He was going to pick up Jan now and would be back the next day as soon as it was visiting time. He said goodbye to her with another kiss. The car was not difficult to find. Even from a distance, he saw the white note under the windshield wiper. Thanks for listening in. That's the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3 is entitled Bruno and Annika, and we will listen to the first chapter, which is called Arrived in Paradise. Thank you.